move now to the Deputy Owen Murphy's issue, the need to ensure that there's a fair, transparent and modern enrolment process for primary schools. Deputy,
thank you, 4 minutes. Thank you, and thank you, Minister. And Minister, I don't want to labour the points because I think it's straightforward enough, and I'm also conscious that it's not your department, but I have a problem in my constituency, and I think it's probably a problem in many constituencies, and I know Deputy Kevin Humphreys is here. I'm sure he's getting the same phone calls that I'm getting about enrolment in primary schools and the process that's in place. But just to give a quick human example rather than a statistical one, I received a phone call the other evening from a young mother who has a young daughter who's due to go into school in September. And she's worried sick because the child hasn't been offered a place yet. Now, there's plenty of primary schools in the constituency, and they're very good ones. But the problem here is that the child has been on a waiting list since she was 5 weeks old. So there's certainly a problem there with the system. Now, when you look at 2 of the schools in the area, she was told that because she doesn't speak the Irish language sufficiently enough, the child cannot go there. On religious grounds, she was refused into another school. Another school, because it's just so popular, she couldn't go there. And with another school, the parents thought perhaps if they got the money together, they might get into a fee-paying school if they could get help from their parents. But then it turned out that they couldn't go there either. And when I say refuse, of course, it's not that they were refused, they were put on the waiting list, but they were so far down, they were basically told informally by the schools not to hold their breath. Now, I've experienced this conversation with parents before, many times actually. I've never actually had the conversation in September, which makes me believe that children are getting places in schools, eventually, and not always in their locality. So I think there's a real problem with the system there, and I think it's something that we need to really look to address in a comprehensive way, because the kind of worry that it has for families on one side, you then got a number of parents putting their children on many lists because they're worried about their child not getting into one school, so they want to be safe. That's fair, completely understandable. The schools themselves then aren't sure how many pupils are coming in the next September, so they can't plan ahead. The system's very inefficient. It's wasting us money, and it's causing unnecessary stress in the community for many young parents and their family. Now, Minister Quinn has plans in this area. And really what I'd be interested to hear is what those plans are, when we're due to see them. But also this week we heard proposals from the Irish Principals Primary School Principals Network on their ideas on how to address this problem. And they talked about a centralised system, a very simple web-based system with an agreed deadline for applications for parents to primary schools and agreed response time from those primary schools as to whether they were in or not. Parents would rank with preference for the schools, and then hopefully in a fair system, children would get into schools that way, and everyone would know in plenty of time where their child was going to be going to school that coming September. The schools would then know how many pupils they would have. It would then have a knock-on effect in terms of classroom sizes, teacher allocations, and everything else that goes on with it. I'm not advocating necessarily the idea as a whole. I don't think power should be put into the department. But I do think there's a more efficient, community-based way in which we can approach this problem. And I'd be interested to hear the Minister for Education's views on that issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
The Minister for Education, Deputy Rory Quinn, has asked me to reply on his behalf to Deputy Owen Murphy's query. And he has said that the need for a fair and transparent enrolment process is something that he spoke about at the Teachers' Union Conference that was held at Easter. And I will quote from Minister Quinn's speech in responding to the points raised by the Deputy. The Education Act of 1998 set out quite clearly that schools are required to operate admissions policies that provide for maximum accessibility to the school. Put simply, schools should be inclusive. Most schools in Ireland, most of the time, are inclusive, welcoming of all children. The Education Act, however, is light touch in terms of providing ways and means of ensuring that all schools welcome all children. Other than Section 29, which has become cumbersome for schools and parents, the current legislation does not include provisions for resolving problems when they arise. At present in legislation, we do not have any tailored measures that deal with different admissions issues that can arise. For example, there is a difference between dealing with oversubscription, which means that all simply cannot be accommodated in the school of first choice, and a situation where an individual child can find no place at all. Minister Quinn said that he will shortly bring to government draft heads of a bill, Education Admission to School Bill 2013. He said he will be publishing the bill in draft form to allow full public discussion, including inputs from the Oireachtas Committee and the education partners. He also plans to publishing alongside the bill the draft regulations that he plans to make when it is enacted. We do not want to unnecessarily intrude into how schools do business. The only policy objective is to ensure that the way in which schools decide on applications is more structured, fair and transparent. The draft legislation will make it clear that some methods of controlling admissions will no longer be permitted. For example, the first-come, first-served basis for selecting students might look reasonable to some, but it can mean that children who move to an area from another part of the country or from other countries can be effectively excluded from schools that have more applicants than places. That situation, according to the Minister, cannot be allowed. The draft regulations will radically alter the operation of waiting lists while accepting that schools need time to implement such change. Schools will no longer be permitted to charge parents simply to apply for a place in a school. We've seen an overuse of preferential treatment for the children of past pupils, or more insidiously, the requirement for children and their parents to attend compulsory open days or to be interviewed. These practices will be curtailed. Any school that is faithful to the Education Act in relation to providing maximum access will have nothing to fear from these proposals. I also wish to clarify that schools will still be able to give priority to applicants that have siblings attending the school. So I'd like to thank the Deputy for raising this issue. As I say, it's the Minister's intention to publish the heads of a bill, to publish accompanying regulations, draft regulations, but then it will be referred to the Oireachtas Committee on Education, and the various interest groups will be invited to make submissions. So we're at the start of a process, and what the Minister has done is to set down, the main tracks along which he hopes the discussion will run.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Murphy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your response, Minister. You're absolutely right. We don't want to unnecessarily intrude in the operation of schools, but I'm glad to hear that the Minister, I know he does recognise that something needs to be done here. I very much support his proposal in this regard. I think the sooner we can get the heads of the bill out and the legislation out and the committees working on this, I think the better. Certain plans are very welcome, of course they are, and I agree completely with the point about siblings. It makes sense to allow siblings and to prioritise siblings in terms of being able to go to the same school. I suppose, just Chair, while we're here, why I raised it as a topical issue is because this week we did hear from primary principals their ideas for a centralised system, and so I was hoping to be able to have that discussion with the Minister to get his response on that particular proposal and to see whether that was going to feed into the framework that he was bringing forward to us. But as he's not here, we're not able to have that discussion on this topical issue, but I appreciate the time that was given to debate it with the Minister, who is here on his behalf. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Murphy.